When I was 13, the dawning of a new millennium took place on New Year's Eve. While people were fearing the worst with the Y2K bug or out partying and drinking, I was home alone. In 1996, my parents had split up, and from there they divorced. My mother and I moved across country from Oregon to Tennessee with her best friend. On the eve of the year 2000, I was home alone, and my mother was currently out of state. Now this didn't worry me, as this was not for the first time. I often came home to find a note on the kitchen counter saying they had gone to Florida for a few days and that there were groceries in the fridge. Since the divorce, she was regularly leaving me alone for long periods of time to go to Florida. We lived on a relatively quiet road surrounded by trees and set a few miles out of town, and I knew most of the people, if not by name, then by face enough to wave in small chat with, and had never before been given a reason to be afraid of being alone. On this night in question, I was staying up late watching television, and had most of the lights on in the house, not because I was afraid, but because at 13 I wasn't concerned with electricity bills or saving the environment. I felt completely safe and protected within my little bubble of home. As I was watching the movie, I kept hearing these weird sounds outside, but I remember thinking it was probably the neighbors. Though they weren't extremely close, a couple of them were having a party/people over for the holiday. About halfway into the movie, however, the power in the house suddenly went dead. I sat on the couch for a minute, just sort of in a panic daze, because it was near midnight and pitch black. I remember thinking the power must have gone out and that it would come back on, so I just decided to sit on the couch with my blanket and wait. A few minutes passed by when I heard a noise in the kitchen where the back door is. My heart started racing my chest because I thought it sounded like the back door being shut. The back door sits just off the dining room, which is connected to the kitchen, which leads directly into the living room, where I was currently sitting on the couch. A few seconds passed after I heard the sound, and I was straining my ears to pick up anything that wasn't supposed to be there. Every noise suddenly felt magnified. When footsteps sounded on the floor, I immediately slithered off the couch onto all fours, crawled around the ottoman, and started as slowly and as quietly as I could make my way toward the space between the love seat and the couch. I knew I could fit under the side table and be completely hidden by the dark in the ottoman, from playing hide-and-go-seek in the dark many times with friends during sleepovers. I was nearly there when the footsteps became more apparent. I knew from the sound of them that whoever it was making their way through the kitchen now toward the living room. They weren't hurried or anything, it was like they were just moving around in the kitchen. I glanced up from where I was, crouched on the floor, and to my horror there was a dark silhouette standing in the archway between the two rooms. To my credit, I didn't scream, however I did panic. I stood immediately to my feet from my hiding spot and ran down the hallway, and I believe the only reason I wasn't overcome was because the person chasing me had to get around the ottoman in the dark to follow me. I did what all children do when they're afraid, and I bypassed the front door, the guest bedroom, the bathroom, and ran to the farthest door down the hallway, my room. In all honesty, I probably wouldn't have been able to get to the front door unlocked and open in time, as it was right off the side of the couch. When I was 10, I got a bird for my birthday. He was a blue-fronted Amazon, and I named him Boo because it was October and close to Halloween. Boo had a large iron cage, and it was kept in my room, despite the fact that Boo, like me, pretty much had the run of the house whenever he wanted. This information will become relevant later in this story. As I ran into the room, I slammed the door shut and locked it. However, the lock was simply one of those little turn knobs that you can easily pop with a butter knife. I had barely gotten the door shut and locked when the person on the other side knocked on it. I have no idea why they knocked, if they did it to mock me or to scare me, but I knew in my heart that my little lock was not going to keep whoever was on the other side out of my room. I didn't keep my mother out when we were arguing, and it wouldn't stand up to brute force. I was panicking on the verge of tears when the person started laughing. It was low and quiet, and because of that it was even more frightening. It wasn't like manic laughter, but as if they were genuinely amused. It was the laughter that really frightened me, and I started heavily hysterically crying and looking around my room to figure out what I could do. That was when I realized Boo's cage would fit almost perfectly between the door and the wall of my closet. The cage moved quietly on my carpeted floor, but as I pushed it into place, it scraped against the door and alerted whoever it was on the other side that I was trying to barricade myself in, because suddenly they threw themselves at my door and you could hear the sound of the wood splintering and the door handle being twisted violently. Boo, who had been stirred by the movement awake, began literally screaming and flapping his wings. I might have screamed with him, but honestly I don't remember screaming. I just remember being extremely scared. Terrified, I crawled under my bed and waited. Several minutes passed and the person eventually stopped attacking my door. Boo continued screaming even after it had stopped. Though being under the bed gave me no feelings of being secure, I didn't come out from under it because I simply had nowhere else to go. I thought about trying to go out the window, but I was afraid he would expect it and therefore be waiting for me on the other side. And it was also several feet off the ground, as the house was built on a raised foundation. I remember lying under my bed, terrified for what felt like hours. I must have fallen asleep because I awoke the next morning to daylight. The fear of what happened came back to me as soon as I registered where I was and why, and scared that whoever had been in my house might still be there, I decided to crawl out the window and run to a neighbor since it was daylight outside, and therefore I felt less afraid. Crawling out a window is a lot harder than it looks, and I did it less than gracefully, as I was not and still am not the most coordinated human being. Once I was back on my feet, however, I carefully made my way around the house. That's when I noticed that the back door was wide open. Scared but feeling braver now that I was outside and that it was morning instead of pitch black night, I walked up the back steps and peered inside. Seeing nothing out of the ordinary, I decided to go inside. Looking back, I cringe on how stupid this could have turned out and that I wish I could have told my younger self to make the smarter move and just go get help, but thankfully no one was inside the house. I did a terrifying, heart-pounding room-to-room check, looking in closets and under bed, behind my couch, anywhere I thought even a small child might be able to fit. I even popped the lock on my mom's bedroom so I could check it and then relocked it afterwards. When I was positive there was no one there, I went back to lock the back door. I noticed that the breaker box on the opposite wall was open. The main switch had been pulled. I flipped it back on, locked both locks on the back door, checked all the windows and front door, then called my mom, where I once again broke down crying hysterically. She called a coworker who came and stayed the entire day with me as they drove back. My mom still took random trips to Florida after that, but I always went with her from then on forward. So a few years ago, I went on a church trip to one of my favorite concerts that runs on New Year's Eve to celebrate the New Year. Not only is it concerts, it has all kinds of other events and things to do besides the music. Anyways, we decided to go super last minute and a lot of the hotels in the area were booked. We ended up staying in a rinky-dink little roadside motel about 30 minutes away from all of the events and pretty much in the middle of nowhere. The entire place was sketchy and made me uncomfortable, but I felt like we could deal with it. So we were separated, boys in a room, girls in a room, and then chaperones. We get into the room and the first thing we notice is a back door. I was wondering what kind of hotel room has a back door. The chaperone staying next door insists that it's sealed shut, but still lets us know that if anyone knocks on it to not hesitate to let them know by knocking on the wall, or whatever was necessary. No sooner than 5 minutes later, one of the guys comes to our room and, jealous of our back door, throws it open, proving that it wasn't sealed shut as we were told. We locked in and went about our business. Later that night, around 11:30 or 12 maybe, we get back to our hotel and our chaperones tell us to lock the doors because there were men sitting outside drinking, very obviously drunk, as they started catcalling us as we went to our room. I didn't think much of it and slammed and locked the door. Later that night, I was woken up by an odd sound, almost like a tapping. I sat up and glanced around the room before I realized someone was knocking on our door. I very quietly got out of bed, careful to move as silent as possible, and went to the door to check the people, thinking maybe the chaperones were doing some weird late-night checkup. No sooner than I glanced out, a hand slowly covered the peephole to hide two of the men that had been drinking outside earlier, and my heart started racing. I slowly got back into bed, trying to stay quiet and calm as the knocking continued, only to see a shadow move out of the corner of my eye and realize there is someone standing outside the back door as well, barely visible through the blurry tinted window. One of the girls I was with woke up too, confused as she looked at me. I used my phone to explain the situation quietly, and we both waited, terrified, as we watched the shadows through the windows and hoped they would go away soon. At some point we both managed to fall asleep again, but when I left my room the next morning there was a paper on the ground. In very shaky, messy handwriting it said, "Seeing your pretty eye was enough." I can still remember that note perfectly, even after I shredded it and flushed it down the toilet to avoid anyone finding out. I was young and stupid. Looking back now, I know 100% I should have went straight to a chaperone and told them what happened. It could have been a very dangerous situation. I'm extremely grateful that I had awoken, rather than one of the young girls who would have opened the door without checking, and also grateful that I'd triple check the doors to be sure they were locked. However, at the same time, it also didn't seem like a big deal to me at the time. Nothing came of it besides extreme paranoia for a while, but all in all, the only long-term effects was a permanent bad feeling / fear of roadside motels. This happened almost 4 years ago in the early hours of New Year's Day. For reference, I was 17 at the time and in my senior year of high school. I'm a male and I'm about 5'10" and weighed about 160 pounds at the time. I lived in the suburbs and I was at a New Year's party being held by my friend at his house, which was a 20-minute walk away from my house. It was about 1 in the morning and I was about to leave with another friend of mine who lived on the same block as me. My friend who was hosting the party asked if we would like a ride home, and in hindsight, we probably should have accepted his offer, but our neighborhood was pretty safe and we figured that with the two of us walking together, no one would bother us. Plus, there was probably other people at the party who needed a ride home more than we did. We said our goodbyes to everyone and began our walk home. The road was predictably empty, with no one but us walking along the sidewalk and maybe the occasional car passing by. It was pretty well lit though, so we weren't walking in complete darkness. My friend wanted to pick up a pack of cigarettes on the way home, so we stopped off at a gas station along the way. When we got to the gas station, it was nearly empty, with only a woman at a pump filling up her car with gas and a guy posted up in front of the store on his phone. We went inside and my friend picked up a pack of cigarettes. We walked out of the store and my friend immediately lights a cigarette. We reach the sidewalk and we hear someone behind us yell, "Hey, wait." We look behind us to see this guy who was in front of the store quickly walking towards us. He looked to be in his early to mid-20s. He was probably about 5'8", maybe 140 pounds from the looks of him. He approached us and asked if he could get a light. My friend and I didn't think much of it and he lit the guy's cigarette. The guy thanked him and my friend said, "You're welcome." We began walking away when the guy continued to follow us, asking where we were going. We told him that we were heading home and asked him where he was going. He said his friends were at a party and he was heading back over there as he left to get some fresh air for a bit. He asked us if we wanted to come to the party. This is officially the point where red flags start going off with this guy. Why the hell would a guy in his 20s ask two teenage boys if they wanted to go to a party with him? We told him bluntly that we didn't even know who he was, nor did we know anyone at the party he was hosting, so we weren't going. He starts laughing and says that we seemed like cool guys to party with. He told us we needed to let loose a little. My friend and I told him we were 18 and 17 respectively to see if maybe that would get him to leave us alone. He chuckled and said that age didn't matter to him and that he had a brother who was 16 and that he partied with him and his friends all the time. Jesus Christ, can this guy take a hint? I thought to myself. We were a little less than 10 minutes away from our houses and we didn't want this creep following us all the way there. I told him firmly, "Dude, we're not going anywhere with you. Now quit following us and fuck off." He gets livid and starts screaming at us for being unfriendly and inconsiderate assholes and that he was just trying to be nice. He then starts throwing racial slurs at my friend. It's probably worth mentioning by now that I'm white and my friend is black. My friend yells at him to get away from him before he cracks him in the face and the guy proceeds to run away from us. My friend and I looked at each other in complete disgust over what happened and spent the next 5 minutes walking and talking about the creepy guy. We both agreed that he was probably drunk or high from a New Year's party. Next thing we know, we hear a car behind us and proceed to slow down to match our pace. We see the windows roll down, which revealed the guy we had just seen a few minutes earlier with who we presumed to be two of his friends, one of which was a man who was probably the same age as the guy and a woman in the back seat who might have been in her mid-30s. The guy tells us that we got off on the wrong foot and asked us once again to join them at the party. My friend and I looked at each other and I whispered to him that we needed to get away from them. My friend tells him that we're not going with them and to leave us alone already. The guy was silent for a few seconds and said, "You're coming with us one way or another." They pull over and quickly get out of the car, which caused my friend and I to immediately go into flight mode. We turned right on a side block and my friend yelled, "Run to the park, we'll lose them in there." We looked behind us and to our horror, the three people were running right for us. We run into the park and we once again look behind us and they're getting closer. We run into the dark, thick patch of trees that covered a good portion of the west side of the park, hoping to evade them. I was panicking at this point because I couldn't see a damn thing and I was worried that my friend and I would trip over something and get captured by one of those sick freaks who went to who knows what with us. We hear one of them trip and fall behind us yelling "fuck," and luckily we see light again and we made it to another path in the park and we made a left onto the path. We heard yelling behind us and one of the guys said that they lost us. The woman yells to split up and search around the park for us. We bolt towards the bathrooms, which thankfully were open, and we hide inside. We took a minute to catch our breath as our lungs were practically burning at this point. We should have called the cops and just hid until they got there, but at the time we were so focused on getting the hell away from those crazy people that we decided to try and make our way to the nearest exit out of the park and run to my house. We waited for about 2 minutes and we bolted out of the bathroom and toward the park exit. Shortly before we exited the park, we heard one of the guys yelling behind us that he found us and we were getting away. We looked behind us to see the guy in the distance starting to chase after us. We ran until we reached my house and I quickly opened the door. We ran inside and I quickly locked it. We went into my living room and collapsed on the couch. We both sat there silently, trying to regain our energy and calm down after what happened, hoping they didn't see where we ran to. I looked out the window several times over the course of 10 minutes and thankfully they never showed up again. We talked about and we were glad that we were both okay and that nothing bad happened to us. We were trying to figure out what they wanted with us. Did they want to kill us, rob us, have sex with us? God only knows. My friend hung around for another half hour before he insisted on heading home. He left and then I went to bed. I kept thinking about what had happened and pondered on what could have happened if they caught me. Even as I'm typing this, I still have thoughts. I eventually fell asleep and woke up and told my parents what had happened. They were thankful that my friend and I were okay, but were upset with us that we chose to walk home and should have accepted the lift from my other friend, or even called them and they would have picked us up. Regardless, we filed a police report and gave them all the information I could. Unfortunately, we never heard anything about it again. I wonder sometimes what the hell they've been doing ever since. I really hope they never harmed another person after that. I can't express how thankful enough I am that we managed to get away from those freaks, and to this day, the incident is still the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. This incident definitely made me more wary of my surroundings, and I try my best to avoid situations where I need to walk late at night, whether I'm by myself or not. I don't know what would have happened had those people got their hands on me, but I do know one thing: I never want to meet those people ever again.